welcome to Black Futures Month. Just one moment, I want to make sure that we are all set. And as we say, we're building the plane as we fly it this morning. So thank you all so very much. I appreciate your time and opportunity to be here and share yet another year, February 2022 of Black Futures Month. And with that, for Black Futures, looking at the opportunity for us to celebrate the future and the Black Fantastic, where we see the intersection of creativity, technology, and community be a part of not only our daily lives, but in the legacies of the stories to come. So for those who don't know me, my name is Dane Sneed, the founder of Subsume Media here in Atlanta, Georgia. We're a technology concern that looks to be the intersection of workforce development for underrepresented voices in technology and creative careers. So by using comic books, video games, and augmented reality, we learn how to not only bridge the creative divide, but also make a way for people to have their stories and their cultures held in the highest regard. So with that, here in Atlanta, Georgia, and proud and happy to be here with you with our team here with Team Subsume. And so we've got a fantastic run of opportunities to show new stories, to show just really innovators in every aspect of time and talent. And that's really where the idea of Black Future Month came from. And to kind of just give a little bit of a background to why Black Futures Month, because obviously, we have a great celebration and reason to celebrate for Black History Month when we look at the contributions of the African American experience, as well as its influence on the entire world, not only just from civil rights, but also just from a cultural, technological, artistic, and every other point of humanity that has some point of resonance of the culture. And so while we have that as one point, I felt like in my own purview that we don't talk about the future in the sense of the Blackness and the things that we see. I think the things that we always talk about when it's technology, sometimes when it's policy, and sometimes when it's just the next progression of human rights and civil liberties, that there's a lot of times that we think of the future, but we don't think of the future as being inclusive. And a lot of the technology that we're developing and utilizing today in and of itself also has an opportunity to not be as inclusive as possible, because in a lot of times the technologies that we adopt as general civilization and general cultures, particularly in more Eurocentric spaces, a lot of times do not include people of color, specifically Black people, or underrepresented or marginalized voices in design and implementation. So with that, a lot of times these systems sometimes, and most times, not on purpose, but at the same time, there's still that opportunity for bias. And so what we wanted to do is, instead of looking at Black History Month just in that simple context, we wanted to expand our vision into the horizons of tomorrow and see and show that the innovators and the people that were building the bridge to the next phase of human existence were indeed Black, were in the room, or the people that are drawing up the plans and putting things in place that will find a space and place that's inclusive for us all. And so going from animation to machine learning to NASA to all these spaces that through my work with Subsume and as a consultant, creative technologist in that space, I've had a lot of opportunities to talk with just some absolutely smart folks. And I said last night, the idea of these people being hidden figures. And one of our keynote, not our keynote speaker, but one of our special guests, Mr. Orlando Jones, on a IG Live yesterday said, why do they need to be hidden? Why do we refer to the people that are building and making things and influencing change in culture? Why are they hidden? Who are they hiding from? and in a very good sense, that really just resonated with me. And the idea is there is nothing to hide. There is so much brilliance all around us, not only in just for Black History Month, but throughout the year. And there's a diaspora of talent, as we're trying to coin that phrase, from here to the continent of Africa and all the spaces in between that really we want to take this weekend to highlight. And so this is our second annual Black Futures Month, where we as Subsume normally have Subsume Summits, which we have three peaks in our year. So we normally focus on technology as a main point, but obviously all of our points with Subsume. So you hear a lot of technology talk, but you absolutely will hear about our work with comics, also in animation, also things in machine learning, but also in civic engagement, city planning. So we've got a lot of entertaining spaces that we want to bring into that. But we do have three main pillars with Subsume, one being creativity, the other is technology, and community. So we have three events, normally Black Futures Month in February, Creative Juneteenth in June, and then a a fall event that normally encompasses right around November, where we look at entrepreneurship as well as how we can celebrate our differences together. And so there was Friendsgiving 2021 this past year, where we had a rare Black book chat and actually looked at a curated list of Black books at Fort Keats Bookstore here in Atlanta, Georgia. And so with that, more details to come, but we are excited to talk about the innovators of tomorrow today. So with that, I want to appreciate everybody for being a part of us and being a part of our family and our community. So with that, we've got an amazing schedule of folks that are coming in, and I appreciate your patience and understanding as we are building this schedule live. Of course, we are here in the midst of the pandemic, so a lot of things are changing, but I'm great and happy to say that our main guests, as advertised and confirmed, are still with us. And so while we have this as a fully virtual engagement, we are absolutely moving towards the embracing each other in the physical in a safe and compliant way as we look to see exactly how we can take Black Futures Month as well as our Creative Juneteenth endeavors and build them into physical opportunities, more than likely here in Atlanta, Georgia, but at the same time, making it an open and collaborative space for all. So with that, I just really wanted to get a start. I want to bring up our streams here to see if I can see if there's any points or questions. And again, thank you all so very much for being a part with us. We just have so much great things to talk about. And the idea of a Black future and speculative fiction and Afrofuturism, of course, the advent of that, which a lot of people point to Marvel's Black Panther as a part to that. But Afrofuturism and its legacy is more than a century old. And I think it's the idea for us that there is an imaginative way that Black people see the future that is unique, but is also motivating and empowering, that allows us to really overcome and really win the opportunities and fair spaces given to do the things that we all know that we're capable of doing. And so this is our dedication and our charge to look not only from a creative lens and a technology lens and from a civic lens, but from a lens of humanity, right? That we all are one people. And at the same time, the differences in culture and language and geography and in accesses are what make the human experience that much more satisfying. So we are here to embrace everyone, also to be open and welcome in our time, to communicate, to connect, and to collaborate. And again, for us, that's in our DNA. That is subsume. And we get this a lot. So the idea of subsume itself is an English word, which means to bring something into something else and to stay included. So if we think of a Venn diagram where we have three items, the space in between is subsumed, right? It is something that is drawn into each other just as it is, without effort, without change. And so that's what we want to be for ourselves in the way that we represent culture, intentionally Black culture in technology, creativity, and community. The things that we create are fine just as they are. And what we bring to the table is something of value and something that we know that others see value in as well. And likewise, look for that valuation in others. So with that said, I'm going to just check in our chat and thank you all so very much. I want to just give a quick rundown of some of the amazing people that we have. And then we're going to go into a beginning part of our show that we're going to talk about the Black history for the future. And I'm very excited. And I felt like this is a great opening, almost a good Sunday morning service on a Saturday morning. I'm excited to share this part with you. But I do want to give a morning run of our service as we go ahead and also confirm the later parts. And know that all this will be available for playback probably in the right after our show ends. So we're updating our website and looking to make sure that we can bring this as a constant and consistent measure that people can come back and look at and also be able to connect with our great speaker list as well as the vendors and programming that we'll have in complement to this as well. So let us take a look. So, and to kind of take one step back before we take two steps forward. Yesterday, we did a kickoff for Black History Month with the Kubert School. And the Kubert School, I actually have my extra one right here. So like our Joe Kubert School of Cartooning and Sequential Art, that is in New Jersey. We actually had a kickoff with a 2-hour panel with the president there, Anthony Marquez, as well as, Sean Damian Hill, and because it's early and I'm trying to remember everybody now. Fernando Ruiz, thank you so much. And with that, we had a couple of hours just to open up with conversation. We talked about how bringing in inclusive characters into stories was important, and how to do so, and why would you as an artist be able to bring that. And so we always look at art in the creative sense of communication as something being very critical. So ourselves as artists and getting a start working on comic books and video games, that stuff's really near and dear to my heart. But being able to look at how not only the characters are represented on the page, but the story of the people that are putting them on the page and distributing them, and being able to share that story with other communities and cultures is important. So for those who got a chance to imbibe with us on that, I know you enjoyed, and I've already had good notes this morning about doing something like that, and doing something like that again on a larger scale. And that is something we'll definitely take in consideration and plan to do so. So thank you all so much for being part of the early evening kickoff. That was 6 to 8. And yeah, so we're excited for what is to come with that. So let's kind of give a quick rundown for today. So we're going to take a step forward and look at Black history for the future. We have two special guests that come to us from New York. And when you hear this, it really is going to put in perspective the way that we appreciate the reason Black History Month exists, and in what context, and a little bit of the legacy of that, as well as why the importance of this month in some resonates more than just within Black culture. And so I'm very excited to have you listen to that. I'll actually be bringing in Ian Michael Brock from Chicago, who is the founder of, I have to remember everything. So is the founder from Dream Hustle Code, 17-year-old savant that is basically leading the next generation of coders and showing and building the bridge between inclusion and technology in real time. And so I had a chance to meet him, and just knew that next time we had our Black Futures Month that we would have to get an opportunity to chat. I'll come back after that and share a project that I'm working on that connects Black history and the future. And I'm excited to share that with you. And then at high noon, we'll have a conversation with Jay Francis, who's the vice president of current series and diversity at Disney Animation Television. And so I just want to make sure to give everybody their proper respect. So I always have to try to remember long titles. But to that, though that will be a pre-recorded portion to start, Mr. Francis assured us, and again, and appreciates everyone's consideration, as we will also follow that up with a live conversation at another point in time. So I'm thankful for that. We'll also be bringing in Twin Drums, which is a game studio abroad that is going to bring a little bit of a sample of their multiplayer role-playing game that was funded on Kickstarter and is in complement with Riot Games, called Wagadu. And it is, we're going to give you a sneak peek of that game here in a little bit. At 2:00, we will be going and talking about metaversing while Black. So this phrase of the metaverse and how things and Web3 and humanity and other parts all connect and collaborate on the next phase of technology and human interaction. We have literally some of the leading minds of this coming up to chat with you on that. Then we are going to take it to HBCU Con, which is a collaborator and partner of Subsumes, and talk about how geek culture on HBCUs intersects with not only the cultural relevance of the space, but also embraces this new community's voice and impact on the world around us. With that, we'll also be bringing in two of the leading AI scientists pretty much in the world with Dr. Sevis and Dr. Make sure I'm pronounce Mutali's last name. I'm going to say Conde, though I think that is wrong. But I'm going to say we've got two young sisters that are like the top of artificial intelligence that are going to come in and talk about the future of Black AI. With that, we'll get right into our evening where we'll have a very special guest with that will come in and talk about the future of storytelling. It is Mr. Orlando Jones. He'll come in and give us an interactive conversation about stories, the way they exist in acting, not only acting in comedy, but in creating and telling your own stories and narrative. And so his great intersects in geek culture as well as in film and television and in so many other spaces. As a true Renaissance man, felt was a great person to bring in for that. And then we lastly are going to close with a keynote from Miss Sidney Clifton, who serves both as the vice president of series and services at the Henson Company, but also as in the philanthropic world is the president of the Clifton House. And so we'll get a chance to chat with her about transmedia and the Black narrative. So just so many things to talk about and so little time, right? So what I want to do is go ahead and bring up our first part of our conversation as we go ahead and get things updated. We appreciate your patience throughout the day. Please drop your comments. Make sure that we are able to interact with each other. We appreciate everybody's patience as well as their kind considerations of each other in this narration of Black Futures. And with that, we'll take it in from there. So again, this is Dane Sneed, founder of Subsume. Thank you all so very much for your time this morning. We really appreciate you. And again, welcome to Black Futures Month 2022. And we're here to help you stay included in the world of tomorrow. Thank you. And thank you so very much. My name is Dane Sneed, and we appreciate you being part of our new program with Black Futures Month 2022. So we're looking at the intersection of creativity, technology, and community, and how our shared Black experiences are here to innovate tomorrow. And with that, we have a couple of our favorite innovators from the space of history and education that we want to go ahead and bring in for a new and fantastic segment called Black History for the Future. And so with that, I'm going to bring to the stage a couple of young scholars that we are happy to have as part of our program. So with that, we have the lovely and talented Kadia Tubman coming back to help us again, as well as Dane Peters. So with y'all, thank you so very much, and a good morning and a good day to you.
Thank you so much, Dedrin.
All right, and thank you as well. So with that, I want to go ahead and turn this over to Kadia and Dana to not only introduce themselves, but to also showcase the brilliance of their programming and their own intelligence to speak much better about this than I do. So thank you again, and I will let you continue with your introductions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Hey, Dane, how's it going?
I'm good. How you doing? Happy Friday to you.
Happy Friday. I know we're going to jump to the introductions, but I love the setup in the back. You can't be like a true Africana's like professional history educator without like African drums somewhere in your house. So I have like 3 of them. So next time I'll showcase them, but your setup is beautiful.
You know, it's only there because of happenstance. So I have a younger son, as you know, who he's going to take the drum and he's going to do everything with the drum except beat the drum. He might beat the drum with someone like his older brother. So it's up there because he can't reach it. You know? And it just so happens that it becomes a decorative piece. So
that's funny. Okay. That's
functionality.
Context, right.
That's an Africana way in terms of aesthetics and functionality. You know,
right. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And I know this is pre-recorded, but we do encourage you to continue to participate in Black Futures Month as a part of Subsume and really just engage with the content we have here today. Although you can't do it in real time, we want you to ask questions to yourselves and each other in your communities, however you get down with Black History Month this year. So I want to start by introducing myself. My name is Kadia Tubman. I'm the manager of education programs at the Schomburg Center, which is in New York, Harlem, New York, to be exact. It's a research library, which is a part of the New York Public Library system. We house one of the largest collections of everything related to African diasporic history, culture, you name it, we have it. And I really want to just take this time to encourage you all to visit the Schomburg Center if you have an opportunity, whether you're in New York or you're traveling. It's an incredible space to just learn about your history and the history of our ancestors. And joining me today, I want to introduce a really good friend, colleague, comrade, soon-to-be Dr. Dane Peters. Listen, I get in the habit, I'm just like, I gotta call you doctor because that's how I see you. But soon-to-be Dr. Dane Peters. Dane Peters is an incoming doctoral student in the Teaching of Social Studies program at Columbia University's Teachers College. He has dedicated himself to the education and inspiring of young people through history and civics. As an adjunct lecturer at Brooklyn College and a BMCC professor, Peters has taught a wide range of topics that explore the Caribbean immigration, political identities of African diaspora in the 20th century, and representation of Black manhood in the political and public spaces. Professor Peters has also co-facilitated and led several study abroad classes to Ghana, West Africa, while fulfilling his passion for education at the college level. Professor Peters has also spent more than a decade in youth development in New York City public schools. He has taken on roles in after school as well as serving community school director in New York City. His work as a committed change agent in public schools has taken him to various neighborhoods throughout the city, including Harlem, Flatbush, Crown Heights, Far Rockaway, East New York, and Bedford-Stuyvesant. Dane remains committed to the education and mentorship of students of color throughout their K-12 experience. And I mean, I feel like we could drop the mic there and we're done. But I want to give you an opportunity if you want to share something with the audience about yourself that did not show up in the bio. I just read.
I'm a father of two boys, Elijah and Issa, and I'm a husband to my beautiful wife, Khalifa, who's also dedicated herself to doing the same thing in terms of service in higher education. I'm very much believer of family and community and the Akan symbol or the Adinkra symbol of Nkunsun, which is unity. I try to embody that as much as possible.
And I believe it. And that's why I wanted you here for this conversation. And for those of you joining us, our conversation, Black History for the Future, was mainly designed to, one, just inform folks about the history of the Black History Month celebration that we host annually, but also to think about ways that we can engage with Black History Month, not only now, but in the future. What are some legacies that we're pulling from in terms of Carter G. Woodson? And also, what are some current day issues that are impacting us that kind of make us want to think about and rethink where we want to go with Black History Month. So for context, I'm going to take us way back. I'm going to ask Dane if you would like to give us, the audience, all of us, an introduction on basically the founding of Black History Month.
Wow. To talk about Black History Month, we really have to put it in context of the time that it becomes that. So General President Ford, signed it into being as being a month, but well before that it was Negro History Month, and it's been specific to the term Negro History Month, which was an American experience. Carter G. Woodson and others around that particular period of time, which is 1926, 27, he was on this wave of Black folks in this country already engaged in cultural meaning and memory and ritual practices. Right, Black women were doing those things in terms of Memorial Days and in terms of as going as far back into the 19th century in small communities within the South with Juneteenth, or even with in all those pockets in the North with celebrations of Haitian Independence Day, celebrating Toussaint Louverture. So he was riding that wave, and so there was this concerted effort around this time period, and I'm saying at the turn of the 20th century, in which Black folks in America, in all throughout the South, into the Northeast, where Black folks are starting to migrate because of terrorism in the South, to be quite frank, was starting to assert themselves, and Alan Luck calls it the New Negro movement. But in that time period also too, there was this concerted effort in terms of documenting and telling our own stories. And so that's the most important part. So 1926, he launches Negro History Week. However, if we go a little bit before that, we can go back to some other key people in there. The institution that you work for, that you work at, Arthur Schomburg, right? Library. They begin to start having a Negro Society for Historical Research in 1911. And then 1915, Carter G. Woodson comes out with Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, right? And so by the time we get to like 1926, this has already started taking on a lot of momentum. Now, one of the things that you have to know about Carter G. Woodson is that, he spent most of his parents were in slavery.
Right.
And, he works in the coal mines up until he's 20 years old.
Right. So
he had a late start to all of this. And part of what people don't know is that while he worked in the coal mines, the newspaper clippings and stuff like that, he would read to the rest of the people working in the coal mines. Right. And so he would, and when you say he's a teacher, it wasn't like he taught in regular schools here in New York and these places or what have you. He traveled the world to teach. One of the places where he taught was in the Philippines. And so he had this collective sense of American imperialism and what was happening in these spaces, like what was happening to Filipinos. And he was seeing what was happening there in their schools as it was happening here in America. And so this idea of miseducation, he had a broader sense of it. And so he wanted to start challenging these notions. Now, there's a brilliant scholar at Harvard University called Jarvis Givens, who's come up with a book called Fugitive Pedagogy. You're probably gonna wave it around and show it off to everybody here.
It's already
like, yes, and name drop. We are doing it shamelessly. I'm a big fan of Dr. Givens and his work because College Woodson taps into this idea of fugitive pedagogy, because one of the ways in which we wanted to start showcasing some of the things that Black folks were doing that were extraordinary was by simply just talking about these achievements within this social structure that we know as American slavery. Right. And these, like the audacity to leave these death camps and these labor camps for freedom, right? So he starts off creating these pamphlets and just for the sake of trying to loop it all in, because I don't want to go all over the place and not bring it back to 1926. But understand that one of the things that he was genius in doing was developing this idea, and I don't want to say too much of this entrepreneurial spirit, but he would go to these schools and give them samples of what he's working on. The schools would read it and they would say, "Oh, okay, this is great. All right." And then he would go back with his colleagues and with his researchers and begin to start doing the research to write the books. And then he would bring it back to the schools and he would deliver it on time. And so you might want to call that the old, if you want to say that, he was Wu-Tang before Wu-Tang, in that sense, where Wu-Tang started selling their CDs out of the trunks of cars.
Like
that's what the brother was doing.
Right.
That's what the hustle, that's a hustle right there in that sense, and so a lot of credit has to be given to. Now, one of the things that College Woodson was also very strong on was that, and it sounded controversial at the time, and this is not the actual words for it, but he said that in segregation there's power. And what I mean by that, and what he meant by that, is that let's use these institutions that we have right now to empower ourselves to its fullest potential. And what I mean by these institutions, an example of that was around this time by 1926, some of the Black fraternities had begun to start forming, and so they started looking for famous figures to start incorporating and recruiting into their fraternities. And one of those in particular was Omega Psi Phi, as we know them as the Qs. And so they asked him, hey, would you want to be an honorary member? And he said, okay, sure, on one condition. You help me with this work here, right? And this work is what he's about to run, Negro History Week. And so from that day to this day, they're intimately associated with Black History Month. And so when Kadia Woodson speaks about these institutions, he's speaking about HBCUs, he's speaking about the Divine Nine, but he's speaking about Black banks, he's talking about Black interests, Black institutions that are controlled completely by Black folks.
Right.
So
all of that was amazing. Especially I did not know the relationship between Kadia Woodson and the Qs. So that's something I just learned. But even so, going back to your comment about Black education, I mean, one of the things that Kadia Woodson is so profoundly known for is being, a Black institution builder. That was his goal. And it wasn't just his own celebrity. It wasn't about him being the leader and everywhere. It was about how do we build Black institutions all over, that we create a mass movement that is for liberation. And I think that's the heart of what you're trying to say, that his movement was always for the liberation, freedom, affirmation, dignity of Black people. And so when we think, even when you said the segregated schools, right? A lot of, Nicole Hannah-Jones has talked about this somewhat in her work too. Oftentimes Black students in those segregated schools learned a lot more about themselves and their histories. And I think Jarvis, he takes up this work too in his book Fugitive Pedagogy, that in these spaces, we were at least able to learn about ourselves and dedicate our education to that. So there's a specific Black education that is incredibly important that oftentimes we're not receiving today. And it's not the fault of integration, but it was just that there were institutions designed specifically for the education of Black people and Black youth. And I think those are incredibly important. I mean, we see that today. I wonder what your reaction is, because I can go on and on, to this pushback against critical race theory, right, in schools, or any discussion of race or Blackness in schools. I wonder how would Kadia Woodson, I want you to embody him in this moment. How would Kadia Woodson respond to this? If he was invited on MSNBC or CNN to talk about this, how would Kadia Woodson respond to this current movement against, and legislative movement against teaching about race, Black history, all of these things in schools? I know that's big, but it doesn't have to be.
So first and foremost, I don't think he would go on the MSNBC. I think he would find himself on a black media platform,
Black Power Media, right?
Or BNC, or possibly a Roland Martin show, or even on the more radical side of things, he might find himself on those spaces to speak towards Black folks. And if white folks want to come in and listen, you're more than welcome to. But this is about us. So, but in terms of this idea of critical race theory and what it is not so much for Black folks to understand what critical race theory is, like the nitty-gritties of it, and understanding the laws, and so that they can understand the social context and the social structures of themselves. But it's more so to understand the breadcrumbs to a crime scene that has been laid out and has been documented by those who have committed the crime. And so it is, in Kadia Woodson's case, I am not too convinced that he would be even more encouraged, if that's the word. I'm trying to find prettier words for this platform, to want to engage in with folks who are asking him about those questions, especially at this time which this is, when he comes out with Negro History Week 1926. That's more than 30 years after the court decision of Plessy versus Ferguson, and he's a graduate of Berea in Kentucky. That it becomes one of the court decisions that bolsters the decision of Plessy versus Ferguson. In Berea College, if we go back and look at the legal history, the court, as well, by extension, the American government would threaten the college, find a near bankruptcy if they continued to allow both Black and white and Native American students to continue to attend the university. The U.S. government did that. Right. And so he was fortunate enough to attend the university before the decision was made. So it goes, it kind of like this interesting move of history. So in terms of that history and the concerning of the self-esteem, so to speak, right? Black folks understood this.
Right. And
not just College U. Woodson, the Free African School that was in downtown New York City that birthed the Ira Aldridges of this world and Henry Highland Garnett, right? One of the things that was noted about that school was the self-esteem of these students who came out of it. And that was literally 200 years ago.
Right.
Right? We go on the African continent. Edward Blyden, who came out of the Danish Caribbean, finds himself in Sierra Leone, is writing about having an African personality and is writing about the education of Black folks on the continent and saying that's the self-esteem of at the time using Negro people was critically important. You come back to them on the stateside in the United States of America, Du Bois and others are writing about the self-esteem of Black folks. So we all, like in our community, we know this, right?
Right.
They don't get that. And there's a reason why. So the question becomes, when you think about the Little Rock Nine, right? Where are they coming from? What are the schools that they're coming from, right? They're coming from really good schools in which the pedagogy, the books that they're reading, the history books that they're reading, the teachers that they have, the principals, many of these principals in some of these schools were PhD holders, right? Black principals, as compared to their white counterparts that couldn't really shine their shoes. And I'm going to be very frank here. They're coming, and why they're able to withstand the kind of racial vitriol that they're walking into, right? There's a self-esteem. There's a self-esteem issue right there, right?
Right.
So College U. Woodson, part of him would probably say kick rocks in many ways. If you don't understand this, then you're playing ignorant, and you may have bought your way. You may have just bought your way into the positions you are, because an intelligent person will understand the conditions of people, because you can't unsee what you're seeing right now.
Right. No, so even you tracing the lineage for the African schools, the Berea College, and the judicial issues around there and segregation, I think, one way, because I agree. I think someone like Kadia Woodson and many other people, Arturo Schomburg, Lorraine Hansberry, all these people would say, like, we've been here. This is not new. Critical race theory, this whole battle against banning books, like certain books, this is not new. And I think this is what fugitive pedagogy gets to. It's just like, we've always been doing this work. This is the work of Black people in America, under racial oppression, under subjugation. Like, we've constantly been trying and fighting and making sure to carve out spaces where we can educate ourselves in a way that is not just like rudimentary, like numbers, reading, and literacy. It was always in service to liberation. And I think that's one of the things that I'm so drawn to Kadia Woodson and and why I get frustrated sometimes when we don't understand the context of how he created Black History Month. Towards the end of his life, Carter G. Woodson became disgruntled with, Black History Month. He became frustrated with it because he saw it being co-opted, especially for profit. He was just this was never about people marketing it and making money for themselves, the individual. Like you mentioned the Association for African American, now it's no longer
study
Negro.
of Negro life and history.
Now it's African American study, but now it's life, right? Now it's more of, he's being critical. He's just now it's been co-opted. Now it's been used to make profit for individuals. And the money was always meant to go back, even if he was fundraising, the money was always meant to go back to the organization or to institutions that were constantly doing the work on the ground. And so when I think about, I've been on TikTok and Twitter, and a lot of people are complaining about how you'll see targets and you'll see all these people spout all this Black History Month. Twitter, all of them will change their handles and have features. Netflix and them will show all these Black movies. And I think about Carter and I'm just dang it, it's so hard to have these movements when they become so separated from the historical context that they become diluted and even appropriated by the elite class, by the top class, by all these by oppressors. And so I appreciate you bringing in that history and that context, because a lot of folks don't know that Carter G. Woodson had a huge support of working class, of grassroots, not just in the beginning of his life, watching his parents as sharecroppers, as enslaved people, not only as living through Jim Crow, but consistently through his life. That was just something he was going to always be committed to working class people, to people on the ground, to actually getting free. And what, for him, I think he would have I haven't read any of his critique on capitalism, but his approach is we can't buy our way out of freedom, right? This is ideological warfare. This is something bigger than that. So even your example for the Philippines and his international analysis, I'm there's so much we can learn from him that are not just Black History Month related. It's just we need to go back to the source.
Right.
This is someone, we need to know what he was actually going for with this month, instead of just saying it wasn't just representation. He was representation, that's good, but we need institutions. We need institutions that are dedicated to our liberation and freedom, and not just our liberation and freedom, but Black people everywhere. So I just want to add that.
So, so great segue, because one of the things that we sometimes miss about Carter G. Woodson, and you made it and you brought that point up, was that, he was, to do the work, he needed people to support him and stuff. And at one point in time, he was taking money from Carnegie and these other folks and stuff. And so he also had conflict also with his own institutions, Howard University, right? And you might even say the people who sponsored Howard University, the library, the Spin Guard, they were the ones who were the heavy sponsors in these institutions. And so Carter G. Woodson was very aware that the minute you start taking their money, you are compromised in the scholarship that you're producing. It is no longer for the community to uplift the community. It is more so for the collection and the study of your people by other folks. Oof. And so it becomes it almost becomes high-tech surveillance in many ways. And in some ways, when he writes The Miseducation of the Negro, and I think, there should be a study of that, brick by brick, one of the things he's very much critical of are Black scholars, and we can be critical of Black scholars in our present day time, doing things just to, for a leg up within this system, but it's not really benefiting people.
Right.
It's not really benefiting the community. So you're basically profiting off Black pain, so to speak.
Right.
Now, here's a kicker in all of this, right? When he takes on these same positions, right? And he's ostracized, and his contemporary at the time, which he has no good relationship with, right? W.E.B. Du Bois suffers almost the same fate. He's kicked out of the NAACP. And then in his later years, he moves to Ghana.
Right.
right? And so Kadia Wilson is very much aware of this and seeing this. And so we also see it in today's time. Think about it, and don't want to sound too controversial. We had 2 years ago, we had social unrest. And then all of a sudden you had these companies that are very much so putting out their diversity statements and what have you. And, my theory behind this, and, and if you read closely Miseducation of the Negro, you would come to the same conclusions. I just use a biblical term, like, the last plague that Ramsey calls on himself, where the angel of death passes through Egypt, right? Or Kemet. And unless you basically shed the blood of the lamb over your door, the angel of death would not pass you. Well, and if you think about it in this sense, right, the angel of death, or this the racial reckoning, is what was passing through and making sure they're exposing people and their racial bigotry and their high-tech racial bigotry. And so people's diversity statements and coming out and saying these things was their way of taking their lamb blood and passing it over the witnesses, so they were immune to this.
Listen. And
so Kadia Wilson was very much aware of this kind of penetration of the psyche of Black folks and the psyche of America, because for many people, okay, Target, I'm just saying, I mean, don't say Target, but their company hasn't come up with a diversity statement, then Black folks will say, okay, cool, we can go back and shop with them. But we had our own institutions that already looked after you. Right. And so there are these issues that he even highlighted when he talked about the banks, in which many Black folks would not go to, and they will walk right past and go to a predominantly a white bank. In turn, that white bank would basically mishandle your money, as what happened 10 years ago with the predatory lending.
Right.
So when we think about, and I know the question about for futures, like the futures has been laid out, like this blueprint of, they all people, what I'm saying is always bet on Black, always bet on yourself, so to speak, right? Trust in yourself, you are enough, we've always used these mantras. Well, look at our institutions. What are our institutions around? In which we would invest in that, would have a concerted interest in us.
Yeah.
So we have to think about those things.
I love that point, and I know we're running out of time, but this was just we were just rolling,
warming up.
But I think of Dr. Eddie Glaude's work in one of recent books of his, Democracy in Black. He spends a whole chapter actually discussing the dismantling of Black institutions. I mean, of course, there's a church, but even more so, people have been moving away from that and trying to find new spaces to organize themselves. And he speaks directly to the lack of organization and institution on the ground, not just in virtual spaces and online, but literal bodies on the ground working together, coming together, not only to just protest, but to literally study together. That is the origin of Black studies programs across this country. Mm-hmm. People coming together to study, to learn with each other, to actually debate and argue and think about solutions and work through solutions together to get to freedom. That was the goal. And I'm, as a person who works in, we both work in education. We think it's incredibly important for people to be grounded in those communities, to constantly talk to each other, but also read this history. And it's becoming increasingly difficult, because we can be so distracted. And oftentimes the only place where you have the time to do this work is in academia. And not a lot of folks want to go to academia. Right. Not a lot of people have the time or the money to do that. And so I do want to, within the time that we have, to stress the need for more spaces like this, more spaces for us to be in conversation with each other. That is what I'm constantly pushing through my work at the Schomburg Center. Just being able to have a free space, also like a library space. That's why schools are so important to the organizing space of Black people. Libraries, schools were so incredibly important for Black people to organize and come together. I mean, we think of the SNCC, the Students for Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, that happened in campus spaces. A lot of these happen in centers and in churches, spaces.
Yeah. And I should just point out that.
Go ahead.
I should just point out that, Kadia Wilson, when Omega Sci-Fi came together and they had that, and they formed a partnership. They raised a lot of money for him, and he was able to complete that work.
Right.
And so when we think about when the people believe in what you're doing, you know, we will follow our feet with our dollars. And so there's a danger in that, because there always beware of false prophets. But also understand that liberation is something where the masses act on. When we looked at going back to the idea of seeing George Floyd breathe his last breath, people didn't need any kind of leadership to say take to the streets. They took to the streets, when we and probably still one of the most understudied events, and I believe it is the truest liberation or expression of liberation was the Haitian Revolution. When the people acted, Toussaint Louverture came late into the revolution in many ways. The people had already acted. Right. And so it was just kind of like someone with expertise kind of coming in and leading them, so to speak. And so when we think about what liberation is, it comes from the masses. It will always come from the masses. Right. It's not going to come from, our politicians and what have you, because of their investment in the system and their place in the system. Because when the system when these systems are dismantled, so goes their positioning. Right. Right. And so, in terms of education, that also holds true when we think about what students want to learn and how they want to learn. If we are not finding ways in which where we can develop this into the ways in which they come to know things, right? Then it doesn't matter how much curriculums we develop and how much lesson plans and the technology that we use. If we're not speaking their language, then this is just, we're just chopping down a lot of trees and cutting a lot of paper and burning a lot of gigabytes on the airways. Right. And to close, I think you're absolutely right. Carter G. Woodson's mission was always to get this to the masses. Like he was fighting intentionally against like ideological genocide, just the complete destruction of Black minds, which ultimately he saw it as just just a doubling down on our oppression. So once we lose the minds of our Blackness, of our ability to think that we are people, that we're human, that we're able and capable of doing all and anything as we have done in the past, we start to give into our oppression. And so I think, I think about Carter G. Woodson even starting a printing. I didn't know about that until recently when I read about his publishing company. He started a publishing company not only to publish the scholarly works that weren't being produced in like mass production companies, but he started it because he was like, I need to make this accessible to the masses. Yeah, we can have these scholarly articles and journals and things like that, but I got to figure out a way to make sure that this is going out to the masses. Because this is a movement. This is not just. I love when I think about Black History Month. It's not just about learning about, it's like we learn about us. We learn about ourselves and each other. It's not just the I, it's the we. It's constantly the we. And so I can't stress that enough. I think to close, I would love to hear one last thing. I know we're running out of time. Sorry, Dedrin. But to close, what is one wish for the future for Black History Month that you wish for all of us? That's one thing. I know you got a whole list. That we come to full understanding that we are enough. Don't need anybody else. We are enough. Right. I is we and we is I. Yeah. I love that. And to close, my future hope for Black History Month is that, we just eradicate white supremacy, patriarchy, capitalism, and find systems and ways of being with each other that are affirming, that are loving, that allow for care and humanity. So thank you, Ashe. Thank you so much, Dane. I really appreciate you. Dedrin, I know you're about to hop back on.
I saw. I'm sorry we went over.
No, it was too good, right? And again, I want to come in with my ashe and amen and Black Power fist, because it was too good. We had to let the opportunity that presented itself was just such a good, just simply testimony of what the importance of us and our history and our legacies and our cultures being more than enough, right? To not only celebrate on this particular standpoint with Black Futures Month or Black History Month, but just on an everyday and a constant and consistent basis. And, and the renewing energy of knowing we have a legacy like this ahead, and this type of, we're built of this type of stuff is more than enough. And again, deserve it so much more time. So I want to humbly ask and appreciate. We got to have you back for Creative Juneteenth. Like, we got to continue the conversation at some point for sure. So for yourself, I just want to just let us know where we can find y'all, and we'll conclude. And thank you so very much.
Yeah.
You could find me on Instagram, Pan-African Jacobin. And you could find me on Twitter, Brooklyn Jacobin.
And you can find me under Kadia Tubman on all platforms: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
Thank you. And this is what we're all about, is Black history for the future. This is what Black Futures Month is hopefully the type of programming and opportunity that we can continue to bring, and the things that our community definitely deserves. So thank you all so very much for being a part. And for everyone else, to stay tuned. There'll be more to come with Black Futures Month 2022. Get what's up soon. Thank you.
All right, thank you.